You're listening to Superpower Up with multidimensional master, superpower expert, and former counterintelligence agent, Tonya Dawn Recla. If you're ready to disrupt reality, then sit down, strap in, and prepare to experience the show that proves there is no spoon.
Hello, everyone. This is Tonya Dawn Recla, your superpower expert, and I'm so excited to have with us today Christopher Cumby. We met at New Media Summit. I was there supporting Neva as an icon of influence, and Christopher was one of the icons there. What I love about his approach to things and his, if you look at his bio and stuff, I love the fact that he considers himself the kick-ass sales guy, right? And the reason why I'm chuckling about this is because, before the show, and it's just a common conversation in the entrepreneur circles is, how do you work the sales and money conversation in when you're, driven by passion, or when you have been gifted with this mission in the world and nobody really wants to add in that piece of it. But without that piece, obviously business isn't effective. And so I think it's a super crucial dialogue. And we're going to talk today about developing self-money mastery, because it's very challenging to truly do your work in the world if you're tied into some sort of a victimization or abdication because of survival fears. And survival fears typically get connected into the money dialogue. And so it becomes a complex thing to look at, but it's also the most simple thing, because as you continue to go about this journey and expand out and connect more deeply into who you are, those fears come forward to be looked at, and then we have an option about whether or not to continue them. And so I'm really excited about some of the work that Chris does and how he works with people to make sure that dialogue is in place so that the business can be successful, so that the mission can actually happen and you can do your work in the world. So without further ado, Chris is also, one of the hosts of Think Bold, Be Bold, and, runs around in the podcasting circles and helps people get their message out in that way and promote what they're doing to the world. And so we're kind of all cut from the same cloth over here. So I'm super excited to have Chris join us today. So welcome, Chris.
Well, thank you, Tonya. It's nice to connect with you again. Absolutely.
Always, always. So we jump right in on these shows and ask, what are your superpowers?
It's a great question. And, I think it really comes down to questions. I have been in sales a lot of years, and I teach that aspect of business and coaching and so forth. But I think it's the ability to ask really good questions is my superpower.
Mm-hmm. I'm laughing. I love it. Well, and you're absolutely right. Coming out of the counterintelligence arena and the due diligence and vetting stuff, what we found was our willingness to follow questions was really our secret sauce. It's
Right.
not the answers. And oftentimes when we teach people, we tell them, we don't necessarily ask questions just for the answers. We're asking questions for a response.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an amazing technique to utilize. But how did you start to come to use that in business?
Definitely probably the first question is, what problem can I solve? And, if I follow my entrepreneurial career, because it started really, really early, I was 7 years old, and because my parents weren't, necessarily well off, but, we weren't poor either. We were somewhere in the middle. But we always had stuff. And, my dad was always adamant that, if I want something, I have to earn it. And
Mm-hmm.
It allowed me to think of ways that I could, utilize, a skill at 7 years old to go do something. Often it was chores, and those led to allowances, and then obviously I wanted more than what my allowance would give me, so I had to figure out a real business. And I collected, and probably for you and I, we remember those days of the glass bottles. From soda pop companies and, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, you name it out there. They use glass bottles, and obviously today it's plastic, but back then you can return them for, money back, and not so dissimilar to some of the beer bottles and things that still have that around the world. But I also knew, based on my dad, that it was a real big pain in the butt. So it was a problem. You had to buy it, but then you got to bring them back and you got to collect the money and all that jazz. So I asked him if I can start doing it, for our neighborhood, and could he build me, because my dad was really great at building stuff. Can he build me a wagon that can fit a lot of bottles so that I can go to every person on the street and collect it, and then collect a commission because I'd actually bring them back money. So it became like that win-win, right? I'm going to give you some money, but I'm going to keep some of it as well, but I'll do the service in between. So that really led to, the first thing is just questioning, what can I do to provide a service? And then, questions for me now become, how do I get to know what someone's needs are? I mean, until I know what a person needs, then I can't really help them solve their problem. And in business, it's usually, in my case now, we need to make more revenue. So I always question their internal process first, because if you have a good business or a service, typically then the issue is you just don't have a great way of attracting more business. Let's look at, that sales side of things or marketing. And I just ask questions, and that's led to a great consulting career. But, now moving into some really interesting things that have led me to just keep questioning stuff and keep connecting as well. That's another great skill that
very cool.
Learn and make sure that, like we met, we didn't know exactly how, but I guarantee something will start to spin as we get to know each other, and how we can service. So, or, provide referrals is always a great way, right?
Well, and I agree completely. And I think that's a severely underutilized kind of technique in business. I mean, we didn't really do formal marketing for a long time because our entire businesses were originally created off of referral and relationships. And that's a hugely viable way to kind of get started in business, but also it teaches you the power of being present and asking those questions and making sure that you're listening and that you're able to offer something of value to people. Because if not, you're not going to have much of a business for very long. But we're going to take a quick break. We're talking today with Christopher Cumby about developing self-money mastery. When we come back from the break, I want to take some of these kind of ideas that he's presented about questioning and asking and really take it back into how can you use those techniques to move yourself further along in mastering the money dialogue and the sales dialogue. So, but before we do that, Christopher, where can people go to find out more about you?
I'm all over social media at Success Playbook, but probably my website is the best place, and you can go to kickasssalesguy.com, or of course my full name, Christopher Cumby, Cumby.com.
Perfect. Well, we'll take a quick break and stay with us, because when we come back, we're going to show you how you can move forward in the money conversation. Stay tuned.
Are you here to change the world? Do you talk about things like vibration, frequency, awakening, and consciousness? Are you pretty sure you have superpowers? The Superpower Net is unlike normal coaching programs and conscious communities. We provide training, intuitive guidance, peer-to-peer learning, intensive one-on-one coaching, and a high vibrational network of people just like you. When you join the net, you get 24/7 access to a collaborative group of people who support you as you master your personal power and unlock your superpowers. If you're ready to use your superpowers to change the world, then join the Superpower Net today. Visit superpowerexperts.com/the-net to learn more.
Awesome. We're back. We're talking today with Christopher Cumby. We're talking about money self-mastery. What did I say we were doing? Developing self-money mastery.
Developing,
look at the notes, Tonya. Look at the notes. What we talked about prior to the break was, Chris talked about how one of his superpowers is asking questions. And I love the stories that he shared about kind of how he's used that process both internally and externally with clients. Let's talk a little bit about why this money kind of sales dialogue is so incredibly paralyzing for a lot of folks, particularly our kind of do-gooders, right? Our humanitarians in the world, those who have been gifted with, knowing how they're going to have an impact on the world. And yet we tend to be hesitant moving into that dialogue. What have you found in your experience, or how have you helped people move through that?
Well, I think first of all, we believe the words that come out of our own mouth. So it's important to have affirmations about your self-worth and, what you're delivering. And I think that that's a foundation truly to, gaining that development around money mastery, and that leads into understanding then what you're worth, and then how you can go and take some of this that you make and start making serious dents in the universe if you want, because without having some form of cash flow or revenue, as we know, it's really tough to make big moves. Put it this way, it's not impossible, because we do know some people that have made big moves without very much money at all. I mean, Mother Teresa is a great example, right? Gandhi is a great example, but we know they're far and few between in that realm. So I truly believe that when people believe in themselves first, they understand what they're worth, what they're able to bring to the table, and serve others and solve, like we talked about earlier in the break, solving a problem. When you know all that, it's just learning skills, like, for instance, learning to pivot in business after that, and we'll talk, more about that if you like, but that's really the first thing, is understanding what you're worth. And, businesses have to, put a value on whatever they're selling, service or product, doesn't matter. Same with people. We're worth something. We're all worth what we want it to be. And I think it really starts with believing that first,
Yeah, I think the worth and the value conversation gets tricky, because it's, over here at Superpower Experts, we talk a lot about the different phases of development. And in certain phases, I do think that it's hugely valuable to introduce concepts of worth, because most people never think about it, right? They think I'm only as good as the work that I do, as opposed to what value do I bring into a situation? What am I contributing to the world just by my presence, and who am I being? And so there's huge value in going into that dialogue. I think that at a certain phase, the folks that we attract are almost use that as a crutch. And so it becomes this like, well, I'm worth more than that, and becomes this real internal dissonance. Like, you've got these two different pieces of you arguing inside of yourself of, are you worth something or are you not? And we have found a ton of success in kind of squashing that dialogue once somebody has moved through it, for sure. Because again, I prematurely walking people through these steps, always backfires. But if somebody's really kind of grapple with the way, who am I in the world, and who am I being, and what gifts do I have, and how am I bringing that into the equation, then in my opinion, like gauging sales and marketing and even the money dialogue in itself from a place of self-worth starts to create a lot of like identity confusion for the business owner. And so there seems to be these phases where it's like, okay, now you're the boss. Like it has nothing to do with your value. It has to do with, how are you going to lead this? How are you going to kind of stick to your guns and say, this is the trajectory, this is the goal? And maybe we need to raise multiple millions of dollars to make that happen, just to get the capital coming in. Those are some pretty like detached conversations that happen on the other side of that kind of identity thing. But it always fascinates me how much people cling to that piece of identifying themselves through their bank account, or through how much money they made, or what was the last big deal that they did, and all this other stuff. It seems to me that there's magic in disentangling that. And what do you think? For sure.
Absolutely. I think it really comes down to the fundamentals. I like breaking it all down to simplicity. It's just way easier to get to the end. And for me, it's happy. I think everybody shares what in life, being happy is our end, goal, or we want to just be happy. Whatever that means to you is different from maybe me and everybody else in the world, but it's still being happy. It's a feeling, right? So that feeling is really where I start, and that's the end goal. So however I get there is going to base again on what I talked about just a little bit earlier, pivoting. You got to get flexible on the method of how you get to your goal, You can be really strong on your goal, and that could change as well. So I never beat myself up if my goals change. But I think, to your point about earlier, in terms of entangling and untangling things, is, it's good to have people to talk to. It's good to have mentors and coaches. It's good to have people that you can bounce ideas on or get perspective. And, I have trusted people that I can talk about, things that are going on in my business, because I know all I need to do is just talk about it. There's a lot of things you can just get off your chest if you put it all out on the table. Don't hide and run from it, because listen, I know everybody does it. I've done it. We hide from problems because it's painful. But the way I, really deal with it behind the scenes to untangle things, as you said, is I talk to people that can either coach, give me perspective, or mentor me through a problem. And that helps me actually see the problem just by talking about it. Most of the time, I solve my own problems.
Mm-hmm. Of course, yeah.
Right. And I think that that's the big thing that people confuse is, and say that, maybe I don't need, to talk to anybody. And no, I'm not talking about therapy. I'm just talking about just getting it out. And a lot of times that might be just you talking to yourself. Because I certainly do a lot of that. I don't know about you, but, I mentor myself.
Yeah. There's a lot of synergy, but I'm glad that you said that, because there is a point in time, we walk clients through this all the time, where it's like at some point in time to move into your own self-dominion, like you do have to coach yourself. You do have to be, have the self-discipline to walk yourself through those processes. And on the flip side of things, I'm laughing because, I shared with you, we were just out at Secret Knock and Neva was speaking, and we did, I sat and had a really cool conversation with Richard Dreyfuss, and he said something which was so cool, because it's a kind of a technique that we teach. But he was referencing exactly what you're talking about, where there's magic in between all of us. And we call it synergy or synergistic collaboration. But it's, in our family, in our marriage and everything, we call it putting it in the middle, right? Bring everything and put it in the middle, because in the middle is where the energies cohere and kind of collide, and there's friction, but there's all this amazing creation that happens in that space, and it's far more exponentially powerful and expeditious if you're willing to go into that space. But it is a vulnerable space. It does mean being willing to be transparent with others, and you get to a place where you realize that there's no privacy anyway, so that doesn't really matter. But but I do agree with you. I think I've seen amazing things come forward when people are willing to have those dialogues. I mean, that's where the mastermind concept came from, right? With Napoleon Hill and everything. And so, we take it a little bit further and say that it's the energy between us that's creating. It's our agreements to kind of come together in that synergy. And that's exactly what, Richard Dreyfuss was giving voice to, was like, if you can get him talking, and like I said, I call it friction or whatever it is that we need to kind of bounce off of. It's kind of like I could even make it biblical in the sense that, Jesus said, where two or more of you gather, there also will I be. That concept is peppered throughout all kinds of religious and spiritual mythos, in the sense of, if you come together kind of open-heartedly, then magic happens, kind of is my crude translation of that.
Exactly. And, what I've learned through experience of, building things and, teams and having people I work with, partners, relationships of all sorts, is that when you co-create, meaning that you're both talking, working through things, collaborating, putting it on the table, as you said, or whatever middle, let's say the middle, then you can co-create. Where I find conflict arises so much, and it's internal as well, and getting back to, money mastery and developing, sort of that mindset through all of this, is that when you co-create, you have less expectations. Because what I've learned about expectations of others is that conflict arises when it's not met. And, where you can get through a lot of that is, having this collaborative or co-creation environment where it's all on the table and now we work through the problem. and come up with ways that everybody knows how to play their role, and you play it well, and that's why teams are so good, and that's why having people that you can talk to is such an amazing place. But to that point, when you do that and you're open to that and being vulnerable, because that's what it takes, is that you can take that self and you can start looking and working around it, and starting to understand how you can take a different perspective as well. And I've gone through some really great exercises. One with Garrett J. White, he talks and works with men, in this whole warrior sort of environment. But, one of the tools he talks about is, the stack and getting through the stack of looking at perspective. And, what do you want, Tonya? What do I want? What do we both want? Right? And then we take it from that perspective, and you can do that on your own. I don't even have to have a conversation if we were working on something. I would just need to know what you would want from something if we were working on it. You know what I mean? And I can work through all that. And I think that that's where that coaching. But you can't learn how to be a coach or coach yourself unless you've gone through that and work with people that can do that. And there's many ways to do that. Books are great coaches.
Absolutely, yeah. The piece that comes up, and we could probably do 20 shows on this, but the piece that comes up is the internal discipline piece. And what I find is that very, very few people actually have within their internal framework that level of discipline. And so, that's why coaches exist. But I'm a big fan of the idea that you can move beyond that place where, for sure, sidle up to people and drift off of them and snag their, take what they've done and make it better for yourself, and take those qualities and those characteristics that you're seeing. But ultimately, I think the thread running through all of this is there's no magic pill. Like, you have to be willing to do the work. You and I both have simultaneously, said that multiple times throughout this interview of it's great to say that you want to overcome money fears and you want to be wealthy and all these other things, but ultimately you have to be willing to dig into all of that gooey messiness inside of you and work through it. There's no get rich quick kind of concept. If there is, it's going to be probably a rocky slide afterwards. But I think that that's kind of the underlying theme is it can be mastered. You can pull all those stories forward. There are multiple ways to do it, and you have to do it. That's true of everything, right? Especially in business.
You have got to execute.
I read the book Grit, and it was just so fascinating. There seems to be this ongoing holy grail question of what really determines if somebody's going to walk through the fire. And someone asked me that the other day. They're like, what's the profile of somebody who will actually, in our language, embody that abstract frequency, who really are willing to let the fabric of reality kind of alter around them? And I was a little bit at a loss as to what that profile looks like, because we do see so many people that kind of open the door and get the first hit of the flame and are like, oh, no, we're good, and shut the door back again. So anyway, I think that's the $1 million question is how do you determine what has somebody actually walking through that? And I do know that the money mastery, the self-discipline, the self-dominion, that whole conversation is wrapped up within that.
Oh, for sure. And I think that, can I offer up, some framework around
absolutely
the things, again, based on, what I said, my superpower, I might as well start using some of it and asking good questions. So I think, primarily this is what I share with a lot of people that it may be in a position where, they want to grow beyond where they are. They want to level up. They want to go to a new level in their environment. They've got to step out, first of all, that comfort zone and get uncomfortable, because you got to learn how to be comfortable in that new place you want to be. So, it's just the normal process. But some of the things you can really do as a framework is ask simple questions, but they're profound. And I find that when people really take the time to do this, they grow, in some cases exponentially. But it's, what do I want? It's a very powerful question, but you got to really, stop and listen. You don't necessarily get it right away, but I know how the human brain works, and we love to solve, questions or problems. Like it's built that way. So why don't we use it, right? And not create these syntax errors that happen constantly, because you're not aligned. You don't even know what you really want. So I think this is a great way to start programming what our brain is meant to produce, and that's a result on the other side. What do I want? And then, simply move into why do I want it? Moving into what feeling am I going to get when I accomplish it? Because we're emotionally driven. If you can align that early and really understand the feeling you're trying to accomplish, you can start cutting through a lot of noise. And once you know what you want, which really comes down to, what I believe is knowing who you are, and really leveraging who you are. I mean, leveraging that into the world, that you can give your gift and what you're really great at. To your point, what's your superpower, right? What is your, expertise? What can you bring to the world? And once you have that, you can really start to answer these questions really well. But let's assume you know that, and you know who you are. What do I want? Why do I want it? What feeling am I trying to get? Why do I want that feeling? That's a powerful one, because that can move mountains. And, again, why is this feeling missing now? So if we're emotional, we can use these and, to our advantages by asking good questions. So that's the framework I would generally start with people when I'm just talking about being open about, where they want to go and what they want to level up on, and so forth and so on. But that's some powerful questions right there.
Awesome. I love that. Those are some great tips. As promised, folks, implement these things now, and you're going to start walking yourself more closely toward your own self-dominion, your own the self-money mastery kind of thing. And maybe money's not your thing. Like, I get it. Like, a lot of folks are actually kind of averse to it, and understand that if you're building, if you're doing your work in the world through some sort of a business entity, that conversation around money is one that you just can't shy away from. It doesn't mean you have to be obsessed about it, but there is a delicate balance there. So Chris, thank you so much for all of this wealth of information, and for giving the listeners some really practical things they can do now to create that change. Let's remind people where they can go to find out more about you.
Yeah, absolutely. All social media is at Success Playbook. And of course, my website directly, Christopher Cumby, Cumby.com. Christopher Cumby, or kickasssalesguy.com. Someone said that a long time ago to me, and I just grabbed the domain, and now I use it today, and it seems to be working well.
I think it does. I love anything that's a little bit bold and courageous. So well done. Sure. Well, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us today, and we appreciate all the insights
pleasure.
And the work you do in the world. So thank you.
My pleasure. Can I throw out just really quickly something for your audience?
Of course you may.
Awesome. So we're working on a great project, and I really encourage everybody to come check it out at richlistnow.com. And that'll be up and running with some really great offers and things for people out there that might be looking for an idea. They're in a startup, or perhaps they want to accelerate things of where they are and get to the next level. So we're offering up some cool freebies coming soon on that. So just wanted to throw that out there for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And to all of you out there, as always, we appreciate your loyalty. Thank you for listening. And until next time, go out, uncover your superpowers, and change the world. Take care, everyone.
Are you ready to discover your superpowers? Go now to superpowerexperts.com and take the Superpower quiz today.